Chapter 2. Draw something, anything. It is a long way from a world with few choices to our world with too many choices, and new choices emerging every day. Choosing has come to be one of the central aspects of our Western way of life. We cannot do anything, go anywhere, without having to choose. What will I wear? What do I want to eat for breakfast? We teach babies early to choose from an abundance of toys. It took me some time to realize that choosing is an activity that is overvalued in our world and causes much frustration. To me, it is not important whether I buy this product or another. It is more important to maintain my sanity. For important decisions, I have come to trust my intuition, my dreams, a feeling that I should turn this way rather than that. We have designed a society that puts choices in our way all the time. We must choose a service, a doctor, a lawyer, a plumber. Have you ever moved to a new city and had to choose a doctor at night? Or agonized over how to choose an electrician or a carpenter in an emergency? How do we choose a profession? What criteria do we use to choose a mate? How do we choose a religion? Choosing has become the quintessential aspect of Western society. Most other people of this world do not choose often, if at all. Life is in front of you. And what do we do when it comes to new choices? Choices our parents never had to make. People have always known how to prevent becoming pregnant, and in this century, it has become feasible to choose the number of children you have. But must we now also choose our children's gender? Do we want to abort a fetus that is known to carry the gene for Down syndrome? Those are choices our parents could not even dream would one day become important decisions. Our forebears would have thought those choices sinful or presumptuous. How do we choose who shall live? Modern medical technology can keep a body living long past the point when 10 or 20 years ago it would have died a natural death. Keeping a body alive, however, with machines and people to service those machines is expensive. It costs much more than most of us can afford, and often more than insurance companies are willing to reimburse. Do we expect society to pay for machines to keep a body breathing? Society does not have deep pockets anymore. How must it decide who shall continue to breathe and who shall be allowed to die a natural death? Should doctors decide? There are so many choices, so many alternatives to everything we do or want, that we have had to learn that sometimes the best choice is not to choose. We may not want to choose a doctor or a lawyer or a plumber or a new dress or another career. Perhaps we want to trust luck or whatever comes our way or what is available while staying within a budget or what is available in our neighborhood, or choose only on days when we feel like it. Because our world has become a world of chaotic overabundance, we feel stressed. The stresses we feel are in a large part the result of the overwhelming number of alternatives we must choose from, but also the result of the fact that we have had no time to develop an ethic to help us choose. The headlong rush into new technologies and new ideas without the time to consider consequences makes it almost impossible for us to choose. How can we have an opinion about something that didn't exist yesterday? Do we really want experts to choose for us? We are learning to be leery of expert advice. All too often we find 20 years later that the experts were no more expert than we were, that they too were ignorant of the long-term effects of a new drug, a new chemical to control pests, or a new way to generate energy. We're beginning to disbelieve experts, distrust authorities, and those who claim to know what is best for us. We call this mad dance freedom. We are proud to be a society of free people, by which we mean people who are free to choose, people who, in fact, must choose endlessly all day, often making choices from alternatives that are so new that we have not had time even to imagine their consequences. We are choosing in a fog. Not long ago, most people, almost all people, had few choices they could make. 1,000,000 years ago, I did not have to choose what I ate. I ate what I could find or catch. I did not have to choose whom I married, or where I lived, or how many children I had. Even a few hundred years ago, almost everywhere in the world, except perhaps Western Europe, I spent my life where I was born, with the people of my tribe. I did what my father did, or perhaps what a maternal uncle did. I married the girl next door, or at most a few doors away. I ate what everyone else ate, most likely what there was available to eat. I wore what everyone else wore. I belonged to the religion of my forebears. I died and was buried in the same cemetery where my parents and their parents were buried, or was cremated as they were cremated. I did not have to choose much. How much simpler life was when we had a bard who sang the songs he knew and we knew as well. How much simpler when there was one healer in our village, and she did not expect me to tell her what was wrong because she knew. I did not pay her, although she often expected a gift at midwinter. If the roof leaked, neighbors helped repair it. If the soles of my shoes were worn, the village cobbler repaired them. We ate what was in season. We traded eggs for vegetables, perhaps, or milk for a wool sweater. Not a bad time on a whole, a time when a major decision might be whether I should go on a vision quest now or later. Today, we go on a vision quest over the weekend. We take shamanic training at a 2-day workshop that is repeated every few weeks for others who want to learn whatever it is that a particular teacher has to say about shamanism. There are hundreds of others who will teach us differently about what they think shamanism is. There are undoubtedly catalogs that will list the various shamanic traditions we can learn. Having so many alternatives serves only to devalue all of them. What has made life in the Western world so stressful is that we think we must choose among a chaos of products and services. Frankly, neither the products nor the services work well anymore. We are in too much of a hurry to give much thought to consequences while we make money, invent new gadgets, start new fads, create new everything. Our very existence on this planet is threatened because in our haste we have made, and continue to make, bad choices. Stress is the price we pay for affluence, an affluence that in the end is little more than a glut of increasingly meaningless choices. If someone would tell me today to draw something, anything, I too would stare into space with a blank look on my face. Too many choices. Chapter 2, Bali and the Barong. What is life? Someone asked me not long ago. I answered, jumping from ice floe to ice floe in a raging torrent. I think of life as a sort of balancing act in an ever-changing environment. If we are fast and agile, we can stay upright by jumping to another ice floe, just as the one we are standing on is tipping or sliding out from under us. Sometimes we fall into the icy water and we must scramble up onto another ice floe and go on. And all the while the river is moving who knows where. The image of rushing ice floes I thought of myself, but the idea I borrowed from the Balinese, whose world view is that nothing in the world, nothing in the universe is stable. One can never know what is going to happen next. In every village in Bali, an island in Indonesia, twice a month, at the full moon and the new moon, an event takes place that Westerners call a dance. The villagers gather in the village square just before dark. Kids, dogs, chickens wander here and there. At one end of the village square are 2 upright stone structures, often elaborately carved, that frame an entrance. Suddenly a horrible cry is heard, and through this entrance a frightening apparition appears, a screeching old witch in a terrifying mask, breasts made of horizontally striped cotton, bold black alternating with white, hanging to her knees, and a tongue that seems to be on fire hanging between her breasts. She is Rangda, the chief Layak, a witch, but identified with all kinds of misfortune, perhaps related to India's Kali. Sometimes she has one or two helpers, adding to the turmoil. In larger villages, these helpers and their screams will precede her. The villagers become quiet, but they have seen this often enough. Rangda, who visits twice a month, is a familiar appearance. She strides around the square, threatening, cursing, screaming. She taunts the villagers. Is there no one, then, in this blasted village who will defend his home from me? First one, then more young men, and some not so young, come into the square. They draw their kris, or dagger, which is an extremely sharp, wavy blade, against Rangda. They will defend the village. They are quite serious about warding off this screaming apparition and the disasters she foreshadows. Now Rangda stands tall, probably on the steps of the gate, facing the men, pointing her fingers gloved with 5-inch-long nails that curve down at them. And it is easy to believe that a force pushes the men back. This almost palpable force ebbs and flows, now allowing the men to come closer to Rangda, then almost literally throwing them back. The villagers seem intensely alive now, observing a battle that is playing out in front of their eyes. This is real. This is no dance. Although it looks choreographed, the force that controls the men is real enough. The villagers watch spellbound. The story may have become routine, but the outcome is always in doubt. In all the times I have seen the barong, as this event is called, it continues like this. Rangda becomes stronger, so strong in fact that she is able to turn the men's daggers against themselves. They are forced to turn their wrists so that the kris is now aimed at their own chests. Bare, of course. Bali is practically on the equator. One can see the point of the kris press, but rarely puncture the skin, yet these daggers are very sharp. The men visibly struggle to use all their strength to prevent themselves from being hurt by the kris. They are under great stress, muscles quivering. Sweat is pouring down their faces and bodies. Some say that Rangda puts the men into a trance, which turns their daggers against them, though others say that the only way to survive while resisting Rangda is to put yourself into a trance. The men are obviously in a deep trance, not the relaxed kind that we have learned about in the West. In this trance, each of them staggers, bent far backward, holding back the kris that seems to want to pierce the chest of its owner. This is hard work. Later, when it's over, the men are spent. It takes at least a day to recover, I was told. This goes on for varying lengths of time until, when the men seem to be at the end of their endurance, the spirit protector of the village enters. Barong, a wonderful master, a mythical beast with a huge carved head. Barong is big. It takes 2 men to carry the sacred image. The one in front is inside the enormous head, swaying from side to side. The man behind is inside the rest of the elaborate cloth beast. Barong is protector. He moves around, reviving men who have fallen. Sometimes, when Rangda is particularly strong, almost all the men fall in faint. Priests and other helpers offer sips of holy water to those struggling to come out of their trance. Barong does not fight, but he prevents the men from being hurt when they are about to pierce their own chests. He strengthens the men's ability to resist Rangda. As the men regain some strength, and as Rangda loses hers, the battle changes. The few men who can find still more energy chase the witch back through the gate, and the village is safe for another 2 weeks. This event takes many hours, sometimes the whole night. It is certainly not entertainment. A trance dance, as some guidebooks call it, but a ceremony. It is all too real. There are times when Rangda wins, when the men cannot prevent her from walking into the village. If that happens, earthquakes shake the ground, volcanoes erupt, epidemics descend, and many other terrible things occur, the Balinese say. The important fact to remember is that no one ever knows the outcome. A dance is a stylized story, and we often know how it ends. but the ending of a barong cannot be predicted. Having watched this dance several times, I believe that it is obviously a battle fought on another plane. It is almost visibly a battle of spirit, good and evil. But that's a Western simplification. The barong ceremony is not about these two opposing spirits. Rangda is a spiritual force of destruction. Barong is protection. And the people are the spirit of survival, of growth, of life. Twice a month, these forces are testing each other's strength and weakness. It is not so much a dance as it is a trial. The barong says something about the Balinese idea of what life is about. To the Balinese, the universe, the cosmos, both the physical and the spiritual cosmos, which to the Balinese are mirror images, is not neat and orderly. They do not understand the Western idea that says the universe is lawful, and that if we know the laws, the cycles, and the regularities, we can predict the future. The Balinese say that the cosmos is unknowable, unpredictable, changing according to no rule, no law of man, or even of gods. That means we must live always and only in the here and now. That is all there is. And we must be prepared at all times to move with the changes that are inevitably happening to our world and to us. Chapter 4, Different Realities. It was my job to travel a few days ahead of the survey team to prepare the villagers. In Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, important people sat down with maps and demographics and had to decide that this village and that would constitute a representative sample of the population. The sample villages also had to be accessible by road, and there had to be a guest house nearby. After all, there would be more than 20 people on a survey team, many of them foreigners and important positions. I had been assigned this job because I understood what the survey was about and I spoke the language. I was a highly trained, but American-trained, psychologist with anthropological interests, and although I had taken some coursework in nutrition, I was really not a nutritionist, nor was I a physician, so obviously I could not do any real work with the survey. But I did speak Malay. The survey was designed to determine the nutritional status of the population. After interviews had been completed, blood and urine samples taken, laboratory tests run, questionnaires analyzed, food samples chemically broken down and measured, the survey results would provide a data baseline on the diet and health status of the population. For local political reasons, only one ethnic group was to be sampled, the Malays. Two other groups, who together formed a little less than half of the country's population, were not included, perhaps because not all of them had been given the vote when the country received its independence a few years earlier. The entire plane load of modern scientific equipment and the supplies had been sent from the United States. It is true that perhaps as much as half of that would have been available in the country and would have cost much less than what had been paid for shipping. But it had been cheaper, the people who organized these surveys said, to send the whole package, standardized for countries that were then known as developing, which was taken to mean that there were no local scientists, physicians, nutritionists, laboratory equipment, and such. Malaysia, rich in many different resources, had an excellent and world-famous nutrition research facility whose studies on dietary deficiencies had become standards for researchers all over the world. Yet, obviously, someone somewhere in the bureaucracy had decided that it was cheaper to send redundant materials, including machines that ran on 120 volt, when the nation's standard was 220 volt. The first village was on the coast, I remember, a community that could have been the local for a Dorothy Lamour movie. I knew, of course, that I could not just barge in and tell them that they had been assigned to be part of a nationwide survey. I must sit down and get to know them, or more important, have them get to know me. Unfortunately, it did not work that way. My visit had been planned for only a few days, and then it was going to be on to the next village. The survey would follow closely on my footsteps, keeping to its set schedule. Half of the team came from the United States, and the individuals in this group could be gone only a few weeks from important positions at home. This was a modern survey performed with extensive equipment and expensive people, and it had to be done by the clock. There was no time for me to be subtle. The idea of a survey was very strange to the villagers. Since the 10 American physicians on the team did not speak the language, they would be assisted by physicians and others from Malaysia who would interpret. The questionnaire was a standard form, I was told, that would be used successfully in many other countries. After the questionnaire, a physician would do a quick physical examination of each of the villagers who had volunteered. In addition, every 5th person would be asked to give a urine sample, and every 10th person would be asked to donate some blood. After meeting the head of the village, I explained the purpose of the survey to the people as best I could. Blood was not something you gave away, the villagers told me. Blood was what kept you alive, after all. Why would anyone want to give blood to a stranger? It was only a small amount, I told them. They shook their head at another example of the incomprehensible foolishness of white people. Even more strange was the idea of a sample. How could their answers be representative of a whole population of the country? That did not seem possible. After all, were they not unique in this village? They knew quite well that even the people of a neighboring village were quite different. However, it was all so strange that they did not question much. Some people asked, "Give urine and blood for what? Was there some sort of reward? Would their 20 doctors be able to treat them, perhaps give them medicines or medical advice?" No, definitely not. I had been instructed to make it very clear that the volunteers would not be paid, that they would not be given any medical advice or treatment. The American physicians who were part of the team were not licensed to practice medicine in Malaysia, and the Malaysian physicians would be too busy. We asked the villagers to participate for the sake of science, or perhaps to save their country. Finally, there were no more questions. I knew I had not convinced anybody, but they were too polite to bother me further. They were decent, friendly, helpful people, and they would wait to see what happened and cooperate as much as they could. This mysterious team that would come to visit might be a diversion. I talked with many people those 2 days. I repeated myself, although I tried to come up with different ways to explain what the survey was all about, why it was important for the government to know how healthy people were, and why it was important to know if their diets were adequate. I doubt that many people understood the purpose of such an endeavor, but they knew enough not to argue with a white man who arrived in their kampong village with a government car and a Malay driver. In addition, they were curious. I obviously had some authority. I spoke for the government, so it was probably all right. The village head told me that, of course, some people would have to work. They would go to the fields or do whatever needed to be done, so those people would not and could not participate. But the people who did not have to work would cooperate. I told myself that was not my responsibility to worry about the sample. The team arrived in 18 Land Rovers. They set up shop in the village community center, a large open space with a floor, a roof, but no walls. Sheets were used to improvise examining rooms. The leader of the team objected when the children of the village crowded around looking under the sheets, climbing into trees to look over the sheets and trying to see what was going on. He commanded me to remove the children. I reminded him that if a team of Asians were to come to his hometown, no doubt his children would also be curious. He looked at me with scorn and declared that for damn sure his town would not even let Asians come in. "Get these people out of here," he said again. I could not, of course, and I did not even try. Eventually, the team got to work without serious interruption. People stood in long lines, patiently waiting their turn. I had the rest of the day off. I was free to wander through the village. It was quiet, with most people clustering around the survey site. I talked with some people I had met the day before. Someone offered me a cup of tea. I could relax after a rather harrowing experience of trying to explain what we were going to do. In the afternoon, the hottest time of the day, when people seek shade somewhere, I found myself sitting on the steps of a house. Somebody mentioned that inside the house was a very sick woman. Yes, a few villagers who stood around affirmed, nodding knowingly. She is very sick. She has been sick for many years, and we expect her to die soon. Without thinking, I asked to go inside. A woman was lying on the mat in the dark corner of the house. There was an air of sickness around her. She was emaciated, but she had an enormously distended abdomen. I am not a physician, but I thought that perhaps it was an ovarian cyst. The woman was barely able to speak, or perhaps she was just too shy to talk with a stranger, and a white man at that. I told her she had to go to the hospital as soon as possible. They would make her better. I probably mentioned that at the hospital they might want to operate. She tried to smile. Her children, perhaps 8 and 10 years old, came in and stood looking at me with big eyes. They did not say anything. I went outside and said, "Who can talk to this woman? She does not seem to understand. She is very, very sick and needs to go to the hospital right away." At first there was no response. Then a young man spoke up, saying that only her husband, or maybe her brother, could determine whether she should go to a hospital. And although they did not say so in many words, they implied, with Asian politeness, that it was surely none of my business. "Well, go get the husband then, or the brother, or whomever I need to convince to take her to the hospital." I was not going to give up doing my good deed. Perhaps I felt that by helping this woman I could feel better about being a scout for the survey. By now there were a small group of people standing outside the house. I told them I would take her to the hospital in one of our cars. "Please, find her husband or her brother or someone I can talk with." Later I realized that I did not think. I was on automatic pilot, standing there in my white skin. I do not remember what my feelings were, but I do remember the urgency I felt. Even though all the people had several times that this was a woman who had been sick for a long time and she was expected to die soon, I felt it was urgent that I take her away from that dark corner in her little house, take her to a modern medical facility, have a surgeon cut out her sickness. I did not think further. Finally, after what must have been an hour or more, the husband came forward very hesitantly. I explained to him what, of course, he already knew. His wife was very sick. Then I added that she could go to a hospital and get treatment. He listened to me patiently and said that he could not really decide that. I had to talk to her brother or her father. At this response, I grew impatient. "Please, get the brother then." There was a little hospital 7 miles from the village. The distance would make it difficult for the villagers to take her there. And obviously she could not walk, since the survey was in the village and one of the vehicles could take her there very easily. A little later the brother came and told an old man who said that he was the father of the woman. Again, I went through my plea. By now it was obvious that the husband, the brother, and now the father of the woman, as well as a growing group of people standing around, were becoming nervous and resentful. In another culture, they would have been angry and they would have thrown me out. But Malays are peaceful people and value harmony above all. No one becomes angry because that embarrasses both parties. No one even raises his voice, ever. They obviously did not know how to deal with me, a stranger who had descended upon their kampong a few days earlier, followed by 20 doctors and 18 Land Rovers and a great deal of noise. Perhaps they thought I was the leader of the survey team rather than an advance scout. I obviously had authority if I could get the use of a vehicle and a driver at the snap of my fingers. But it was not an authority they recognized. It all must have been very confusing, I realized much later. My behavior was particularly confusing because I spoke their language fluently enough at the time, and yet did not understand their customs, their adat law. I made demands on them, but I should have known that in the Malay culture, no adult ever demands or tells another adult what to do. Anybody who has even a little knowledge of their culture would know that it is simply not done. It is rude, crude, contemptible behavior to tell another what to do. Even raising your voice is an offense in the Malay culture. I am ashamed to admit that I probably never considered what the woman herself might be thinking and feeling while we argued about her without her being present. In the end, it must have been my inexplicable insistence that made the father, the brother, and the husband agree to have the woman removed from her house and taken to the hospital. One of the vehicles had once served as an ambulance, and it carried a stretcher of sorts. We loaded the woman on the stretcher and put her in the car amid an ominous silence in the now fairly large group of people. At the hospital, they took one look at her and said she could not be admitted without 5 pints of blood, a hospital policy. If the blood were not donated before admission, they would never get it later, they said. I knew that this was true. It was past 4 in the afternoon. I convinced the staff to keep the woman in the waiting room while I rushed back to the village to get able-bodied men to come back with me to donate blood. Not only had I forced my will onto the whole village, now I had come back to beg 5 people to give blood. I was obsessed. I talked, I ranted, I cajoled, and finally I bribed 5 men to come with me. I paid them for working time lost, even though it was late, well past the time when anyone would work. I could not stop myself. We arrived at the hospital. It was getting dark. The men gave blood. I paid them, and the vehicle took them back to the village. Near that village, there was a guest house where some of us were staying. Guest houses were a relic of colonial times, usually bungalows available to important travelers, which meant usually originally white people. The woman was in the hospital. I was exhausted, but felt a sense of accomplishment. I do not believe I thought in terms of saving her life, but I definitely felt pleased. I had won, and probably I imagined that I had done what every normal white person would have done. The doctor at the hospital had confirmed my guess. She did have an ovarian cyst. They would remove it surgically early the next morning. I felt good. It was dark, perhaps 7 o'clock in the evening. I was sitting on the veranda, my feet up. A woman approached and stood on the grass on the other side of the railing. She asked me if I was the man who had taken her sister to hospital. I repeated what had become sort of a refrain. Your sister is very sick and needs to be in hospital. I did not have a chance to say much more than that. She began talking and continued for what must have been at least half an hour. She never raised her voice, but she made it very clear how upset she was. She did not move. She never took her eyes off my face. Do you know what you have done? She said. Sister is very sick. She has been sick for 5 years. We all expect her to die. Sister knows she is going to die. Her husband knows she is going to die. Her children know she is going to die. I know. The whole kampong knows she is going to die. We have all had our time to accept that. We grieve for her. We grieve with her husband and children. We feel her pain. She has had much pain, but she is a brave woman and she does not complain. We take care of her as best we can. All the people of the kampong come and helped with her children. We cook for them. We bring them the best of what we have. We sit with her day and night. We pray with her. We know her sickness. It is our sickness as well. The sickness has been with us a long time. She paused to take a deep breath and then went on. Now, you come. You rip her out of her home, out of the village. You cause so much commotion that we do not know any more what is happening. Again, she took a deep breath. Maybe this is the end of the world. She paused only briefly to go on almost immediately. What right do you have to take her away from husband, children, and kampong? She is sick. She needs us, all of us, around her. Now she is all alone with strangers. She should be with her family, her friends, and her kampong. Instead, she is in this stone building, with nobody to give her food she likes. She is all alone in a cold room. I know. I went to see her, and I was told I could not see her. I am her sister. I have taken care of her for 5 years. Of course we know she is sick. She has been sick all these years. All of us, we, the whole kampong, have adjusted ourselves to her condition. She herself has resigned herself to her condition. The children have adjusted themselves to the fact that their mother is dying. She was sick long before you ever showed up here with your cars and all these people in white coats. The sickness is part of our daily life. We all live with it. She herself is ready to die. She knows she is dying. She is not afraid. She is a good woman. We all know she is going to die, and when she dies, the kampong will die a little. She is the kampong, and the kampong is she. We all die a little when she dies. She paused and looked away. When she dies, we all bury her, and life will go on as before. Her death will be a gentle leave-taking, not this rude tearing away, not like you taking my sister away to the hospital. She stumbled over the words. She was angry, but could not show that. Do you know what is going to happen when she dies now, in hospital, so far away from home? Do you know what is going to happen when she dies there? She was crying softly. We cannot even bury her. Our religion forbids moving the body more than an hour's walk. If she had died at home, we could have buried her with the little cemetery of the kampong. We could have come to visit her grave whenever we want. If she dies now, she will be buried with strangers, sick people, at a cemetery near hospital, and we cannot visit her often. It is too far to walk. Did you think about that? Again, she paused to take a deep breath. Who do you think you are, anyway? Tun Allah, the Lord God himself, that you can show up in our kampong and disturb the flow of our lives? Do you have any right to take one of us, a sister, from the same mother who bore me, out of our lives? Do you have any right to throw us all in a panic? How can you do that? Yes, my sister is dying. We are all together in this sickness. All of us are dying a little with her. Now what? What are we to do now? Tell me that. What are we to do? She shamed me, more perhaps than anybody had shamed me before. I felt myself shrinking. Whatever satisfaction I had felt in doing a, quote, good deed that day evaporated. Instead, I experienced my own ruthless arrogance, my insensitivity to people who were so much like the warm, wonderful people I had grown up with. How could I have forgotten? I had done what was proper and expected in my own world, perhaps in my own reality. But this was not my reality. The reality of the villages was different, and I knew that. I knew their world. I had lived in their world. I was mortified to realize that I had forgotten not only my manners but also my sensitivity. I could not answer this woman. What could I say anyway? She was right. During her monologue, I had noticed a few people watching from far away. I understood that they were staying away to spare us the added embarrassment of an audience. In this culture, I remembered, one never, ever embarrasses someone. This woman, in shaming me, was embarrassing me, but also embarrassing herself. I knew what it must have cost her to say what she did. With a visible effort, she collected herself and said, "How much chance has sister now that she is in hospital?" The word for hospital in Malay is rumah sakit, house of sickness, or house for the sick. The way she spit out the word, I knew she felt strongly that the place where her sister had gone was truly a house of vile, ugly sicknesses, not at all like the world of the kampong, where the woman's sickness was a natural part of life and death. Her sister, part of the kampong, was far away in a stone building constructed especially to hold people who had many different kinds of illness, in a place where they cut people open, a building that smelled strange, run by people who would not allow her own sister to see her. This building was alien and unnatural. I had called the doctor about a half an hour earlier. He had told me that the planned surgery would be touch and go. The woman would have barely a 50-50 chance of making it, he said. I told her sister, half and half. She almost spat on the grass. Half a chance that she will die, half a chance that she will live. Is that any better than she had before? Months later, I heard that the woman lived to be discharged from the hospital. Whether she recovered fully, I do not know. I was too ashamed to go back.